Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving into something a little different, the Philippine Judiciary's plan for real-time justice.
Yeah, it's definitely not our usual topic, but
But it is fascinating.
absolutely, it's ambitious to say the least.
So fill us in, what are we looking at here?
So we've got excerpts from their Strategic Plan for Judicial Innovations 2022-2027,
Okay.
also known as the SPJI.
Catchy?
Yeah, so it's basically their plan for tackling some seriously deep-rooted problems in their courts.
Okay, so not just like tweaking things around the edges they're going for, like
Oh, no, they're going
systemic change.
systemic change, yeah.
What kind of problems are we talking about?
We're talking massive backlog of cases,
Oh.
trials dragging on for years, lack of public trust, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, I mean, you hear about these things, but
Yeah,
it's hard to really grasp, I guess, how,
it's hard to grasp the scale.
yeah, the scale of it.
Yeah, and it even gets down to people struggling to find basic legal help, which is a huge issue.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't even get your foot in the door to understand what your rights are or how to navigate the system,
Exactly.
that's a fundamental problem.
Absolutely.
So where do these four guiding principles fit into all of this? I know they're called timely and fair justice, transparent and accountable justice, equal and inclusive justice, and technologically adaptive management.
Right.
But what do those actually mean in practice? How do those principles actually address these massive issues we're talking about?
Think of the principles as the foundation for this whole reform effort.
Okay.
Each one targets a specific set of problems. So, for example, timely and fair justice tackles the issue of court congestion and, those frustrating delays that we were talking
Right,
about.
because justice delayed is justice denied, right? But what's actually causing these delays in the first place? Is it just too many cases and not enough judges? Or is there more to it?
It's definitely more nuanced than that.
Okay.
The SPJI points to things like lack of resources, inefficient processes, and even the lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic
Oh, right.
as contributing factors.
Because everything got so backed up during that period. Wow.
Exactly. Courts were shut down or
Yeah.
were operating at reduced capacity,
Exactly.
and that created a huge ripple effect
Yeah, that makes total sense.
that we're still seeing today.
But I imagine beyond the practical issues of just too many cases, not enough resources, there's also the problem of public perception, right?
Absolutely.
If people see these constant delays, they start to think, well, the system's broken.
Right, and they lose faith.
It's not working.
Exactly, and the SPJI specifically acknowledges that
Clear.
these delays feed into this lack of public trust.
Yeah, it's just like
It's a vicious cycle.
a self-perpetuating.
Exactly. Delays lead to distrust, which can then further clog the system.
Right, because if you don't trust the system,
Yeah.
you're not going
You're
to
less likely to cooperate or even,
participate.
seek justice through legal means.
It's like they're trying to rebuild the system from the ground up, not just like patch the cracks.
Exactly. They're going for that systemic change.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dig into these challenges one principle at a time,
Okay.
starting with timely and fair justice. What are some of the key obstacles they're trying to overcome when it comes to actually making justice timely and fair?
Well, it's not just about speeding things up for the sake of it, right? The SPJI really emphasizes that fairness
Yeah,
needs to be a part of this too.
of course.
And they acknowledge that there's often this perception of a lack of transparency and fairness from the public.
Right.
And this idea that decisions are based on, connections, not merit.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge problem because even if the system is working fairly, if people believe that it's not,
Exactly.
that undermines the whole thing.
It erodes trust just as much as actual corruption would.
Yeah, and I imagine part of that is just a lack of understanding of how courts actually work, right?
Right.
It's easy to assume the worst when you don't know why something is taking so long or what the reasoning is behind a certain decision.
Exactly. And the SPJI acknowledges that that lack of understanding is a big part of the problem.
So are they just trying to educate the public, or are they taking more concrete steps to address that perception problem?
It's a bit of both.
Okay.
So public education is definitely a part of it,
Right.
but they're also trying to address those systemic issues that contribute to those perceptions.
Got it. So they're saying, okay, let's look at the root causes, not just the symptoms.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are some of those root causes that they've identified when it comes to timely and fair justice?
Well, one of the things that they're very upfront about is resource constraints.
Okay.
Courts are often understaffed,
Right.
underfunded, and they just lack the infrastructure to handle their caseloads efficiently.
Right. So it's not just about adding more judges or building more courtrooms.
Exactly.
It's about making sure that the existing resources are used effectively.
And that the people within the system have the support they need.
Yeah, it sounds like timely and fair justice is about more than just speeding things up.
Right.
It's about fundamentally changing how the system operates.
Pers-
Okay, so let's move on to the next principle,
Yeah.
transparent and accountable justice.
Okay.
What are the main challenges they're trying to address with this one? Because again, it kind of goes back to this idea of public perception, right?
Right, and the SPJI acknowledges that people often see the judicial process as this kind of black box.
Yeah.
Right? Decisions are made.
Yeah. You go in and something happens.
Exactly, but it's unclear how or why that happened.
Yeah, and that leads to...
And that breeds suspicion and distrust.
Yeah.
And even these unfounded rumors about, corruption or bias.
Right, because if you don't know how something works, it's easy to fill in the blanks with your own assumptions, and those aren't always accurate.
Exactly. And even if those assumptions are wrong, they can still have real-world consequences.
Right, because they can discourage people from even trying to seek justice
Absolutely.
to the legal system.
Right. They might just say, why bother?
It's not going to work for me.
Exactly.
So it's not just about making the system fair. It's about making it look fair and making sure people actually understand how it works.
Precisely.
Okay, so how are they proposing to do that?
Yeah.
Are they just trying to be more open about their processes, or are they taking more concrete steps?
So they're definitely emphasizing the need to be proactive about transparency, not just reactive.
Right.
So they want to make information about court processes, case statuses, judicial decisions
Wow.
readily available to the public.
So just putting it all out there.
Exactly. The idea is to demystify the system
Yeah.
and show people that it is operating fairly and impartially.
That's a big shift from how things are typically done, I imagine.
It is a big shift.
But information alone isn't enough, right?
Mm.
What about accountability? How are they planning to address that piece of the puzzle?
So the SPJI very clearly addresses this issue of unfounded beliefs and perceptions of, external influences impacting court decisions. And they talk about the importance of maintaining judicial independence while also increasing transparency and accountability.
Right. It's like you have to balance those two things.
Exactly. It's a tough balancing act.
Yeah. So what are some concrete steps they're proposing to achieve that balance?
So one key initiative is the establishment of a Judicial Integrity Board, or JA.
Yeah.
And this board would be specifically tasked with receiving and addressing complaints from the public.
So giving people a channel to actually voice their concerns.
Exactly, and potentially see action taken.
If those concerns are valid.
Right.
Okay, so it's about making the system more responsive to the people it serves. But wouldn't that potentially open the door to frivolous complaints or even attempts to influence judicial decisions through public pressure?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And the SPJI acknowledges that there's a need for safeguards
Okay.
to prevent that from happening. So they emphasize that the GI will operate independently and that any investigations will be conducted fairly and impartially.
So it's not just about bowing to public pressure. It's about creating a mechanism for legitimate grievances to be heard. Okay, that makes sense. Now let's move on to equal and inclusive justice. This feels particularly relevant, in today's world where we're increasingly aware of systemic inequalities.
Absolutely. And the SPJI actually directly confronts this harsh reality that access to justice is not equal for everyone in the Philippines.
Yeah.
They point to discrimination based on gender identity, social status, even geographic location as major barriers to justice.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of these challenges.
Yeah.
And they're all interconnected in so many ways.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's not just about making the system faster or more transparent. It's about making sure that everyone can actually access it in the first place.
Precisely.
Okay, so how are they proposing to tackle this inequality? What are some of the concrete steps they're outlining in the SPJI?
Well, they're taking a multifaceted approach. So one key area is institutionalizing a clinical legal education program, or CLEP, in law schools.
Okay, what is that?
So this would essentially train future lawyers to provide legal aid to underserved communities.
I know that.
Yeah, it's about creating a pipeline of support for those who need it most.
So you're catching people early on in their legal careers?
Exactly.
And instilling this idea of, service and giving back to the community.
And ensuring that everyone has access to quality legal representation, regardless of their background or their financial means.
Yeah, because I imagine if you can't afford a lawyer,
it's a huge barrier.
You're at a significant disadvantage.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's a great initiative. Are there any other things that they're focusing on when it comes to equal and inclusive justice?
So they're also focusing on strengthening the Sharia justice system,
Okay.
which is crucial for ensuring inclusivity
Right.
for Muslim communities.
It's about recognizing the
It's
diversity
absolutely.
of the population.
And ensuring that the legal system meets those diverse needs.
And it's not just about expanding access. It's also about making the system itself more inclusive.
Right.
Right? We talked about those guidelines for gender-fair language and courtroom etiquette.
Absolutely.
Those may seem small.
They seem small, but they send a powerful message.
It's about creating a culture
Exactly.
of respect.
And recognizing the dignity of all individuals
Yeah.
who come before the court.
And I imagine if you don't feel safe
Yeah.
and respected within the courts, they're not going to trust the system.
You're less likely to even seek justice in the first place.
Yeah, it's all interconnected.
It is all interconnected.
Okay, so we've talked about timely and fair justice, transparent and accountable justice, equal and inclusive justice. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, technologically adaptive management.
Right.
They're talking about a complete technological overhaul, which sounds incredibly complex.
It is complex, but it's also incredibly exciting.
Okay.
The SPJI very clearly acknowledges that outdated technology is holding the entire system back.
Right. It's like trying to run a 21st century justice system with 19th century tools.
Exactly.
Okay, so what are some of the key challenges they're addressing here when it comes to technology?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is just the existing infrastructure. A lot of courts are still reliant on paper-based systems.
Really? I mean, I know things move slowly, but
It's surprising, but yeah.
wow, so they're really starting from scratch in a lot of ways.
In many ways, yes, and that's incredibly inefficient. It's prone to errors, and it makes it very difficult for people to access information or track the progress of their cases.
Yeah, and I imagine it creates a huge barrier to access for people in remote areas,
Absolutely.
or people who can't easily travel.
Or even just people who are, tech savvy and
Yeah.
used to doing things online.
Yeah, it's just not a user-friendly system.
It's not.
Okay, so they need to modernize.
They need to modernize.
But where do they even begin? I mean, this seems like a massive undertaking.
It is a massive undertaking, but the SPJI outlines a very clear roadmap for achieving this digital transformation.
Okay, so what's the first step?
One of the first steps is addressing that existing infrastructure.
Okay.
So they're calling for a complete overhaul of the current e-court system.
So they have some kind of electronic system in place.
They have a basic system in place.
But it's not
It's not a
Insufficient.
sufficient job.
it's not meeting their needs.
Okay, so they're talking about e-court system version 2.0.
Exactly.
What does that look like? What kind of features are we talking about?
We're talking about e-filing, so you can file court documents electronically,
Oh, wow.
digital case files.
So no more
no per paper.
rooms full of file cabinets?
Exactly. Everything is digital.
That's incredible.
And online payment systems.
So you can pay your court fees online.
Exactly. They're really trying to streamline the entire process.
Yeah, make it as user-friendly as possible.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's a huge step, just digitizing the paperwork. But we also touched on the potential of artificial intelligence, or AI.
Right.
And this is where things get really futuristic.
It does feel very futuristic.
Yeah. So what are they proposing to do with AI in the court system?
So AI is a big part of their vision. They're exploring its use for legal research.
Automating court proceedings and even assisting with things like voice-to-text transcription.
Wow, so AI is actually going to be involved in court cases.
Potentially, yes.
Does that feel a little unsettling to you? I mean, AI making legal decisions?
It's definitely one of the more controversial aspects
Yeah.
of the SPJI, and they acknowledge that. But they also emphasize that AI should be used responsibly and ethically,
Right.
always with human oversight.
So it's not about replacing judges with robots.
Exactly. It's more about using AI as a tool to augment human decision-making.
Okay, so for example, AI could help judges sift through mountains of legal documents
Exactly.
to find relevant precedents or analyze data to identify patterns that might not be obvious to a human.
Precisely.
Okay, that makes sense.
And it could also be used to flag potential biases
Right.
in legal arguments or decisions.
Yeah, make sure everyone's being treated fairly,
Exactly.
regardless of their background. That's reassuring.
Right.
But even with all these technological advancements, we still have to consider the human element, right?
Right.
How are the people working within the system going to adapt to these changes?
That's a key consideration, and the SPJI recognizes that training and education will be essential.
Of course, because you can have the best technology in the world, but if people don't know how to use it,
It's useless.
It's not going to be effective.
Exactly. So they're planning to develop a Philippine Judiciary online learning platform,
Okay.
not just for judges, but for all court personnel.
So it's about upskilling the entire workforce.
Right.
Making sure everyone is comfortable with the new technology and understands how to use it effectively.
And it's not just about the technical skills, right?
Right.
It's also about addressing that potential cultural resistance to change.
Because this is a huge shift.
It is a massive cultural shift.
Yeah, and I imagine there will be some pushback.
Absolutely. And the SPJI acknowledges that.
So how are they planning to overcome that resistance?
Well, they emphasize the need for a very comprehensive change management strategy.
Okay.
They need to communicate the benefits of these reforms, very clearly address concerns.
Right, bring people along.
Exactly, and involve all stakeholders in the process.
Yeah, make them feel like they're part of the solution.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's a massive undertaking, but also incredibly exciting to see a system as traditional as the judiciary willing to embrace such radical change.
It's really inspiring to see.
Yeah, and it raises some important questions for other countries to consider. I mean, could this model be replicated elsewhere? What are the universal lessons to be learned from this attempt to modernize justice?
Those are questions we can explore further as we continue following this story.
Yeah, absolutely. But for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
And it seems like we've just scratched the surface of this topic.
We've only just begun.
So let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll delve into some of the specific solutions the SPJI proposes for tackling these monumental challenges.
Sounds good.
We'll be right back after this.
All right.
All right, so we've laid out the battlefield, years-long delays, lack of trust, unequal access, and technology that's stuck in the past. What does the SPJI actually propose to do about all this? Where do they even start?
Well, remember how we talked about those delays eroding public trust?
Yeah.
They're attacking that head on with a case flow management program.
Okay.
It's designed to track cases and make sure they're moving through the system efficiently.
So kind of like air traffic control, but for court cases.
Exactly.
Making sure nothing gets lost in the shuffle or sits on someone's desk for months.
Precisely. And it's not just about being organized. They're looking at successful models in other countries.
Oh, interesting.
Like Singapore, where similar programs drastically reduced case backlogs.
Okay.
So learning from what works elsewhere is a key part of the SPJI.
That's smart, borrowing the best ideas from around the world.
Yeah.
But what about the fairness part of timely and fair justice? How do they address that perception that connections matter more than the actual law?
Well, streamlining processes helps because delays often fuel those suspicions,
Yeah.
but they're also focusing on judicial education and support.
Yeah.
The SPJI talks about making sure judges have the resources and training they need to make well-informed decisions quickly.
It's like they're saying we need to empower the people making these judgments, not just throw more cases at them and hope for the best.
Exactly. And a better trained, better supported judiciary is also seen as more competent and independent,
Right.
which can help build public confidence.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's shift gears to transparent and accountable justice. We talked about how people often see the courts as this mysterious black box. How do they plan to open that up?
One way is through radical transparency. They want to make court schedules, case statuses, even judicial decisions easily available to the public.
Wow, so like online databases, maybe even mobile apps.
Yeah, whatever makes it easy for people to access information.
That's a big change.
It is a huge shift.
Yeah, but wouldn't that be a logistical nightmare? And what about sensitive information or cases that need to be kept confidential?
The SPJI addresses those concerns. They talk about carefully balancing transparency with the need to protect privacy and security.
Okay.
And it's not like they're just dumping raw data on the public. They're looking at ways to present information in a clear and understandable way.
So maybe summaries of key decisions, visualizations of case flow, things like that.
Precisely.
Making it digestible for regular people.
Exactly. And remember that Judicial Integrity Board we discussed?
Yeah.
That's another key part of building accountability.
Right. It gives people a formal way to,
Their voice concerns.
yeah, and potentially see real action taken.
Right.
So it's about creating a system where the public can actually hold the judiciary accountable. But what about ensuring that everyone has equal access to this system in the first place? That's where equal inclusive justice comes in, right?
Absolutely. The SPJI acknowledges that justice is often out of reach for many Filipinos, particularly marginalized communities, those in remote areas, and those who can't afford legal representation.
And we saw that statistic. Only 20% of people with legal problems
Yeah.
actually get the help they need.
Right. It's a massive gap in access.
It's huge.
Yeah.
So how are they proposing to tackle this?
They're tackling this problem on multiple fronts. Remember that clinical legal education program?
Yeah, the CLEP.
That's a big part of it. Imagine a new generation of lawyers specifically trained to provide legal aid to those who need it most.
It's about creating a pipeline of support,
Yeah,
making sure everyone has a voice in the legal system.
exactly, regardless of their background.
I love that.
Yeah,
Oh, and they're also looking at ways to strengthen the Sharia justice system.
right, which is crucial for ensuring inclusivity for Muslim communities.
Yeah, and it's not just about expanding access. It's also about making the system itself more inclusive.
Absolutely.
Right. We talked about those guidelines for gender fair language and courtroom etiquette. Those seem small.
They seem small, but they send a powerful message.
It's about creating a culture of respect.
Exactly, and recognizing the dignity of all individuals who come before the court.
All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Technologically adaptive management. They're talking about a complete technological overhaul, which sounds incredibly complex.
It is complex, but also incredibly exciting.
Okay, so break it down for us. What does that actually look like?
The SPJI acknowledges that outdated technology is holding the entire system back. They're proposing a leap forward, embracing digital systems to make justice more efficient, accessible, and transparent.
We talked about eCourt System version 2.0.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like? What kind of features are we talking about?
Imagine this. You can file court documents electronically
Okay.
through e-filing. No more printing out reams of paper and physically taking them to the courthouse.
That would be a game changer for so many people.
Especially for people in remote areas or those with limited mobility.
Absolutely.
And it's not just about filing. Remember the term digital Rolo?
Yeah, vaguely.
That's the complete digital record of your case accessible online.
Oh, wow. Lawyers, judges, even the parties involved can access all the relevant documents instantly from anywhere.
So no more waiting for files to be physically transferred or copied.
Exactly. It would speed things up immensely.
Of course, there's e-payment.
Right. So you can pay court fees online without having to queue up at the cashier's office.
It seems like they're trying to make it as convenient as possible.
They're aiming to make the entire process as seamless and user-friendly as possible.
Okay, so they're digitizing the paperwork, which is huge.
Mm.
But we also touched on the potential of artificial intelligence, or AI. This is where things get really futuristic.
It does feel very futuristic.
So AI is going to be making legal decisions.
The SPJI emphasizes that AI should be used responsibly and ethically, always with human oversight.
Okay, so no robot judges yet.
Not yet. It's more about using AI as a tool to augment human decision-making, to make the process more efficient and potentially even more accurate.
So, for example, AI could help judges sift through mountains of legal documents to find relevant precedents.
Or analyze data to identify patterns that might not be obvious to a human.
Precisely. AI could also be used to flag potential biases in legal arguments or decisions, helping to ensure that everyone is treated fairly regardless of their background.
That's reassuring. But even with all these technological advancements, there's still the human element to consider. How will the people working within the system adapt to these changes?
That's a key consideration, and the SPJI recognizes that training and education will be essential. They're planning to develop a Philippine Judiciary online learning platform, not just for judges, but for all court personnel.
Oh, wow. So it's about upskilling the entire workforce.
Exactly, making sure everyone is comfortable with the new technology and understands how to use it effectively.
And it's not just about technical skills, right?
Yeah.
It's also about addressing that potential cultural resistance to change.
Right, because change is hard, especially in a system as steeped in tradition as the judiciary.
Absolutely. So how do they plan to overcome that resistance?
The SPJI acknowledges this and highlights the need for a comprehensive change management strategy. They need to communicate the benefits of these reforms, clearly address concerns, and involve all stakeholders in the process.
So it's a lot of hand-holding and reassurance?
It is a massive cultural shift, and it's going to require a lot of effort and buy-in from everyone involved.
Absolutely.
Right.
But it's exciting to see that they're recognizing that technology alone isn't enough.
Right. It's a tool that needs to be used thoughtfully and ethically to achieve those broader goals of fairness, transparency, and accessibility.
It's about using technology to empower people, not replace them.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key aspect of technologically adaptive management, the creation of a judiciary e-library.
Okay, a digital library specifically for legal research. Tell me more.
Imagine a vast repository of legal documents, laws, case precedents, scholarly articles, all digitized and accessible online.
Wow.
Judges, lawyers, researchers, even the general public could access this treasure trove of information from anywhere with an internet connection.
That's incredible. It would democratize access to legal knowledge.
Exactly, leveling the playing field for everyone.
And it's not just about access. They're also planning to incorporate AI-powered search and analysis tools into the e-library.
Right, so you could ask a specific legal question, and the AI would instantly pull up all the relevant documents and precedents.
That would save researchers countless hours.
Exactly. And it could also help to ensure that legal arguments and decisions are based on the most up-to-date and accurate information.
So it's like having a superpowered legal research assistant at your fingertips.
Precisely.
But all of this digital transformation, the AI, the e-library, it sounds incredibly expensive.
That's a valid point, and the SPJI acknowledges that securing adequate funding will be a major challenge.
Yeah, I bet.
They'll need to convince policymakers that investing in these technological upgrades is essential for achieving their vision of real-time justice.
And it's not just about the initial investment, right? They also need to consider the ongoing costs of maintaining and updating these systems.
Absolutely. Sustainability is key. They need to ensure that these systems are robust, secure, and adaptable to future technological advancements.
So it's a long-term commitment, not just a one-time fix.
Exactly.
But even if they can overcome these financial hurdles, there's still the human element to consider.
Right. Will judges embrace these new tools? Will lawyers adapt their practices? Will the public trust a system that relies so heavily on technology? These are all valid questions.
It seems like they're facing a whole new set of challenges, even as they try to solve the existing ones. But it's also incredibly inspiring to see a system as traditional as the judiciary willing to embrace such radical change.
I agree. It's a bold experiment, and it will be fascinating to see how it all unfolds.
And it raises some important questions for other countries to consider. Could this model be replicated elsewhere? What are the universal lessons to be learned from this attempt to modernize justice?
Those are questions we'll continue to explore as we follow this story. But for now, let's take a step back and consider the broader implications of these reforms. What kind of future are they trying to create with this ambitious plan?
That's a great question. Let's delve into that right after this. Okay, so we've been deep in the weeds of this plan, talking about everything from AI to e-filing, but what does it all actually mean? What kind of future is the Philippine judiciary trying to create with this?
It's a vision of real-time justice where the system is efficient and transparent and truly accessible to all Filipinos. They're talking about a future where justice isn't just this abstract concept, but a reality that everyone can actually experience.
So not just faster court cases, but a system that people actually trust and believe in.
Exactly. They want to eliminate those years-long delays that erode public confidence. They want to make information about the courts readily available so people understand how the system works and can see that it's operating fairly.
And make sure that everyone, regardless of their background or location, has equal access to legal assistance.
Precisely. It's about ensuring equal access to justice for all.
They're really aiming for a complete transformation of the system.
They are. It's a bold vision.
It is. But let's be realistic. How likely are they to actually achieve all of this? We've talked about a lot of challenges, both technical and cultural.
There's no doubt that implementing these reforms will be incredibly difficult. It will require significant funding, a sustained commitment from the government, and a willingness to embrace change within the judiciary itself.
And even if they can overcome those internal hurdles, there's still the challenge of public perception, right?
Yeah.
They can build the best system in the world, but if people don't trust it, it won't be effective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They need to win back the public's trust, and that's not something that happens overnight.
It's a long game.
It is. It's not just about changing laws or procedures, it's about changing hearts and minds.
So how do they do that? How do they convince people that this time things will be different?
It's about demonstrating through concrete actions that the justice system is truly committed to serving the people. It's about being open to feedback, continuously evaluating their progress, and making adjustments along the way.
So it's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly.
But even if they only achieve a fraction of their goals, it will still be a remarkable achievement.
I agree. What they're attempting here is nothing short of a paradigm shift in how justice is delivered. And it's something that other countries, even those with well-established legal systems, can learn from.
Because ultimately the challenges they're facing, those delays, the lack of trust, the unequal access, those are universal problems.
They are. And the solutions they're proposing, embracing technology, streamlining processes, focusing on inclusivity, these offer valuable insights for anyone looking to create a more just and equitable society.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Philippine judiciary's quest for real-time justice, What's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think the key takeaway is that real change is possible, even in a system as complex and entrenched as the judiciary. It requires bold vision, a willingness to challenge the status quo, and a commitment to putting people at the center of the justice system.
And it requires a recognition that justice is not a static concept. It needs to evolve and adapt to meet the changing needs of society.
Absolutely. And it's a process that requires ongoing effort and vigilance. It's not something you achieve overnight and then check off your list. It's an ongoing commitment to building a better future for everyone.
Well said. So to our listeners, keep those minds curious and never stop questioning how we can create a more just and equitable world.
Until our next deep dive, stay engaged and keep exploring.